Welcome to the Defense and Aerospace Report. I'm Vago Muradian at the 8th Halifax International Security Forum in Nova Scotia, Canada. And we have with us a legendary European reporter, Josef Joffe, who is the editor of Zeit. Sir, you've observed U.S. politics for decades.
I teach it at Stanford, too.
So you know it inside and out.
Yes.
Obviously, there's a big discussion on Donald Trump and what. Well, it's the least I could do for your patience over the years. From a European perspective, how is this election seen? What are the concerns about the election of a president that's questioned Article 5? German friends of mine have told me, that this language is unacceptable, for example, that he's used, which is antithetical to German comportment in many ways. But, what's the sense and what's next?
The long and short of it is, if the Europeans had been allowed to vote, then I guess it would have been an 80% landslide for Hillary. Why? Because, above all, Europeans cherish from an American president stability, predictability, no surprises. And this guy is a surprise by himself, and he at least talks the way as if there's going to be a lot more nasty surprises down the road. So that's why the Europeans obviously are worried.
So how do you see the election? And do you think, for example, that any of the things that he has said, whether it's getting cozier to Russia, obviously the reason for that is to better fight ISIS, I think would be his side of the story, but also some very concerning questions, for example, about Ukraine and, Ukrainians may have had all of the package of it, including Article 5, means testing. What do you think is next?
Well, first of all, I'm not looking at it from the point of view of early November 8th, but a few days later, and I was at least surprised and gratified how his rhetoric changed. After talking to President Obama told the press, we've talked to him about NATO, and he is interested in maintaining strong, robust alliances with our key strategic partners. That's better than saying the alliance is obsolete, and if you don't pay up, we ship out. I'm also heartened by, just one other example, that wall between Mexico and the U.S. has now shrunk to fences and parts of wall here and there, and the 11 million illegals he wants to deport, according to him and CBS, has shrunk to 2, maybe 3. And we'll only do criminals and people with a criminal record. I also like the way he embraced Hillary Clinton. Remember, lock her up, Clinton? She's now somebody whom the nation owes a great debt of gratitude. What's the upshot of this? He is, I hope, going to behave differently as a president than when he was a candidate. Is there a guarantee? I don't know. But let me say one quote Obama once more. He said, this office has a way of waking up people, and it is this job takes your predispositions and changes them once they collide with reality. So, like the old movie from the 90s, reality bites. And that's what I think, I hope, will happen to the president as opposed to the campaigner.
One of the things, you have been a fair-minded critic of the United States foreign policy for a very long time. Mm-hmm. So you can be assured that you're going to notice if we do something stupid.
Yes.
From your standpoint, what are the things that this administration has to do in Europe, but also elsewhere?
In 20 seconds or less?
Or you could take a little bit longer than that.
Well, the most important thing is to not just to reassure the allies, but to reassure America, so to speak. This alliance has been a cornerstone of American foreign policy for 70 years. And it's in the interest of the United States to maintain that, because NATO's borders are America's borders. And it's a lot cheaper and more efficient to defend the country there than it's here. So that would be the first step. If I were him, I would make a trip to Europe and make the appropriate noises. In the process, I would tell them, I thought about this Russian thing, about my buddy Putin. Well, actually, maybe our interests are not that aligned. And for instance, in Syria, In the campaign, I said, we are fighting ISIS, the Russians are fighting ISIS, Assad is fighting ISIS. Well, then we are in the same boat. Well, we are not in the same boat because Russia and Damascus are not fighting ISIS. They're fighting our guys. They're fighting the moderate democratic forces. And I don't think it takes a rocket scientist to understand that the U.S. will eternally be in a competitive relationship with Russia. And if you are competitors, you can't be buddies.
What's the best long-term way to deal with Russia as long as it's under Putinism?
In what part of the world? In Europe? I think what Obama finally did. Remember that Obama was bad news. He drew down the American military presence. He kind of outsourced the Ukraine to the Europeans. You deal with this. And lo and behold, suddenly under Obama, the U.S. is putting heavy gear and soldiers and troops back into Europe, and it has egged on the Europeans to deploy 4 multinational battalions to the eastern edge. So these are the kind of eternal interests to me that America has, no matter who runs the country. And I would hope that Mr. Trump will understand what the eternal interests of America demand. The United States does for the Europeans, but also does for itself by doing for the Europeans.
And since we're probably not going to talk to you before Barack Obama leaves office,
Yeah.
what is your, because you have been a critic of the administration's,
Yeah.
but what is your verdict of the Obama presidency and its foreign policy?
Well, remember, reality bites. Obama, I think, started out with some very grievous strategic mistakes. Pulling troops out of Iraq, pulling troops out of Europe, a kind of pursuing what I call a policy of self-containment, retrenchment and retraction. And then reality did bite, and he understood that reset with the Russians, just like I've looked into his eye, into his soul, doesn't work, and therefore very late in the game he reversed course. And I just hope that Mr. Trump is going to reverse a lot more quickly than it took Obama to do so.
Sir, thanks very much for joining us.
Bingo. Thank you.